Hi, my name's Shanna, and I'm here at Humboldt Redwoods State Park. You guys, welcome to the Virtual Junior Rangers program. This right here is the Junior Ranger logbook, and if you signed up for the Junior Ranger virtual program through Ports, remember we'll be taking the Junior Ranger pledge, and you can start collecting your badges. So I wanted to start off with a little bit of business. As you know, those of you who joined me live on Thursday, at 11:30 through the Ports program and actually signed up can collect digital badges, and those are emailed to you. So I got a little note here telling me that if you get 4 digital badges, you can actually get mailed a metal Junior Ranger badge, a real metal star-shaped Junior Ranger badge. And if you get 8 digital badges, you can get a certificate of completion mailed to you. If you get 10 digital badges, you can be mailed an official State Park Junior Ranger patch. It'll have a saber-toothed tiger on it. So I want to let you guys know about that. And in order to do that, you do have to sign up for the Junior Ranger program through Ports at ports.ca.us/junior-ranger-programs. And for those of you who are watching this later, that'll be on the screen someplace for you to look at. So if you register, you can go ahead and start collecting your Junior Ranger awards. Well, that's the business taken care of. So now let's get into today's topic. Today, we're going to be talking about arthropods and insects. I really like insects. In college, I actually studied entomology. Entomology is the study of insects. But I said we were going to talk about arthropods and insects. So let's start off by talking about what an arthropod is. 75%, so that's 3/4 of all the species on Earth are actually arthropods. They live in every place on Earth, from the deepest ocean vent to Antarctica to the highest mountaintop. You will find arthropods. So they're pretty important to know about. So arthro is actually Latin. Remember, Latin is the language of science. Arthro means joint and pod means foot. So arthropods are animals with jointed feet. This right here is a picture of a crab. As you can see, it does have bent knees and a hard skeleton. One of the things about arthropods is all arthropods have their bones on the outside. They have an exoskeleton. You might have heard that if you're into robots or video games. Exoskeleton means that they don't have pokey flesh that dents in like us. Instead, they have hard bones on the outside. So this is a crab, and a crab is a crustacean. A crustacean is an arthropod you can find in the ocean. This right here is a spider. Spiders have 8 legs, and you can see the joints in the legs. Spiders live in webs or sometimes run around by themselves and are jumping spiders or other kinds of spiders. Spiders are arachnids, and they are also arthropods. This right here is a centipede. Millipedes and centipedes both have their bones on the outside and also have jointed legs and feet. So they're another type of arthropod. There are many different types of arthropods. Now, I have a quick quiz for you guys to see if you're paying attention. If I talk about clams, are clams arthropods? Let's see. Do they have their bones on the outside? Well, they do have a shell that opens and closes. That's pretty hard. But I've never seen feet on a clam. So I'd say, no, not an arthropod. Let's choose another hard one. What about an earthworm? Earthworms, they kind of look like a caterpillar. They're long and thin. And when you poke them, are they soft and kind of squishy, or are they hard with their bones on the outside? Earthworms are not arthropods. They don't have any bones on the outside. They don't have any feet at all. In fact, probably the hardest thing to guess is a knight in full armor. Let's see, a knight in full armor. It has a really jointed foot. It has really hard covering, but it's a human on the inside, and its bones are on the inside. So no, a knight in full armor is not an arthropod either. They're a lot closer than the other things we talked about. Now, if we talk about scorpions, are scorpions arthropods? Let's see. I have a scorpion right here. They have 8 legs and some claws, and they do have their bones on the outside. And with their pointed tail, has the bones on the outside that can lift it up. Guess what? Scorpions are arthropods. Well, another thing that's an arthropod is insects. And that's actually the main thing that we're going to talk about today. That's my favorite type of arthropod. Insects. Now, half of all species on Earth are insects. If you think about it, that's a lot. But what is a species? If you're one of our younger junior rangers, you might not be familiar with that term. So, a species is a specific type of animal, like a house cat is one species, and a tiger is another species, and a bobcat is another species. And if a whole species goes extinct, we can't get them back because they're so unique. So it's very important that half of all species on Earth are insects. Do you guys know what an insect is? I bet you do. But in case you don't, let's talk about it. So insects have 3 body parts. There's the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. Now the head, of course, is where the eyes are, just like on the human. And insect eyes are compound. That means that they see in little dots, a lot like pixels on a computer screen. And the pictures that they see go together to make the whole picture, a whole bunch of dots. Those are called compound eyes. Insects also have antennas that come out of their head that they use as their primary sense organ in order to be able to feel. And then insects have their mouth parts. Some insects have sucking mouth parts, and some insects have chewing mouth parts. But that's what's on the head, is most of the sensory organs. In the middle is the thorax. The thorax is where they have their locomotion. That's kind of a funny word to say, huh? Why don't you guys try it at home? Locomotion. Now, locomotion means movement. We use our legs for locomotion. They have legs also. But unlike humans who have 2 legs and 2 arms, insects have 6 legs. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Now, insects can have very, very specialized legs. For example, the front legs of a butterfly tend to be folded up and they do not stand on them. They use them instead to taste flowers that they land on to see whether or not there's still a lot of nectar left. So when you see a butterfly, its front legs will oftentimes be folded. Then you have the middle legs of the insect and the back legs. If you think about an insect like a grasshopper, you probably know that the back legs are greatly enlarged for jumping and full of muscles, because jumping is the primary locomotion of a grasshopper. Now, the other way that insects can get around, but only when they're adults, is by using wings. Only adult insects have wings. Remember how we were talking about how the skeleton's on the outside of an insect? Well, because the skeleton's on the outside, they cannot grow without shedding their skin. They literally have to swell up and rip their back open like the Incredible Hulk and pop out bigger than they were and expand. And when they do that, they would damage their wings. So only adult insects get wings. Those wings are also attached in the thorax. Now, thorax is a strange word that you might be having trouble remembering. So I'll tell you a little thing that I use to remember the thorax. If you're an Avengers fan, this might work for you too. Now, if you remember, one of the Avengers is named Thor. Thor had a big hammer, and his hammer is his power. But he loses his hammer. It gets destroyed. And then what does he have? He has an axe. So this right here, the center where the locomotion is Thor's axe. Now, insects, I said, have three body parts. They have the head, the thorax, and the abdomen. What happens in the abdomen is almost the same thing, almost as what happens in our abdomen. The abdomen is where insects digest. They eat with their mouth parts, and then the food goes down into the abdomen where it's digested and pooped out. They also use it for reproduction. That is why you find a stinger attached to the abdomen of some insects. Now, that is not actually a stinger as far as the insect is concerned. That's an ovipositor for laying eggs. So only female insects have stingers. But what's different than humans is the abdomen is used for breathing. Insects do not breathe and not through their mouth in the head. Instead, they breathe through spiracles on the sides of their abdomen. And so their abdomen, even when they're adults, has to be able to expand and contract in order to allow them to breathe. So you guys, what is an insect? An insect has 1, 2, 3 body parts and 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 legs. In Latin, insects are called hexa, which means 6, poda, which means feet. So hexapoda, 6 feet. Now, we learned what an insect is, but you guys are probably familiar with some different kinds of insects. So let's talk about some different kinds of insects and learn how to tell them apart. My personal favorite is going to be the dragonfly and the damselfly. Dragonflies and damselflies have been around since before the dinosaurs. Insects evolved on land, not in the water, but not very long after insects came to land, they started to get very specialized, and we ended up with the beautiful dragonfly. In prehistoric times, dragonflies were 2 feet across. Now, the dragonfly is one of the most primitive insects that has wings. And if you look, when they land, they hold their wings out to the side. However, if you see what you think is a dragonfly and it lands and folds up its wings, it is in fact a damselfly. That is the easiest way to tell a dragonfly from a damselfly. Dragonflies land with their wings spread out, and damselflies fold up their wings when they land. I do so love dragonflies. They're very beautiful to watch flying around in the water, right above the water. And dragonflies live for only a few weeks. But did you know they can live for years as nymphs in the rivers and the creeks? Also, most insects have chewing mouthparts that come from the side, unlike our jaw, which opens like this, or they have sucking mouthparts, which is a straw. And when they first molt, they actually take the 2 individual halves of the straw and zip them together, just like a zipper on your jacket, and make a straw. But dragonflies, when they are nymphs, are very special. They're the only one that has a jaw that comes down like a human's and can actually catch its prey and pull it into it. So they have a jaw like a human that's called a mask. Now, I love dragonflies, but we got to talk about some other kinds of insects too. So let's talk about what is called lepidopterans. Lepidopteran is Latin for scale plus wing. These are beautiful insects. There's butterflies and moths. Now, if you want to learn how to tell the difference, let me go up just a little bit closer here so you can get a better look. So the butterflies do have scales on their wings, and if you touch them and trying to catch them, you can actually knock off the scales and make it harder for them to fly. Now, butterflies land with their wings open, and then they'll flutter and open and shut their wings, scattering sunlight and attracting mates. And butterflies have the sucking mouthparts that they use for collecting nectar, and they also have long, thin antennas with little knobs on the ends Remember how I talked about their feet, their front feet for tasting the flowers? There are many different types of butterflies, but this one is the shape of a swallowtail. Many butterflies have different shaped wings. This is a moth. Now there are two types of moths. There are moths that land with their wings overlapping each other like this and will actually sit flat. And those moths may fly during the day and have thin antennas, just like a butterfly, but without the knobs on the end. So if you see a butterfly that looks like a butterfly, with its wings laying flat on its back, that would actually be a moth. Most moths that fly at night are quite fuzzy and have feathery antennas. This right here is my drawing of a Ceanothus silk moth that actually lives here at Humboldt-Redwood State Park. You can see how hairy its body is, and it's actually the same color as a redwood tree bark to help it camouflage. And then you can see the large feathery antennas and the sucking mouth parts. These insects do not feed as adults. They only live for a few weeks as adults. They primarily mate and lay eggs. They do most eating as caterpillars. Another type of insect that is quite popular is the grasshopper. If you remember, I talked earlier about grasshoppers and crickets. You can see the grasshopper right here in this picture. They do have the specialized jumping leg that I was talking about before that's very, very, very muscular that helps them jump. This is very important because until grasshoppers are adults, they don't have any wings. Each instar, which is what the baby ones are called, they have a nymph and it sheds its skin, and then it would be the next instar. So each time they shed their skin, they can grow a little bit. And they use these legs for hopping and until they go through all their stages and are no longer a nymph and are an adult. Now, one curious thing about a grasshopper is that its ear is right here. Its ear is basically in its armpit. What a strange place to have your ear, huh? Now, grasshoppers also have chewing mouth parts, and they eat a lot of grass, as do crickets, and a lot of other plants. Now, this right here is a type of fly. And you may say to me, Shanna, that looks more like a mosquito or a crane fly. But guess what? Those are types of flies as well. There are many different types of flies. Now, flies, you can tell them because they only have two wings. That's right, one pair of wings. And instead of the other pair of wings, they have what are called halters. These tiny little things right here that are used more for steering when they fly. And they also have antennas with sucking mouth parts. And they have big eyes so that they can see all the way around. In fact, if you see a fly that looks like a bee, the easiest way to tell them apart is the exceptionally large eyes on the flies. Some flies have short legs, some have very long legs, but all flies only have two wings. That's why in Latin, they're called diptera, which means two wings. Now, next we get on to some other insects I bet most people around here know about. We're getting into the Hymenoptera. Hymenoptera means membrane plus wing, and it actually is wasps, bees, and ants. Now, you may say, I don't like wasps. Wasps sting me. Wasps make all kinds of crazy things. They are always after my food. Every time I have a picnic, they're trying to sting me. Well, actually, only the females can sting because only the females have the ovipositor. And there are many types of wasps that are not social, that do not live in colonies, that do not try and protect their hive. Now, a wasp has a small head with little eyes, long, straight antennas, 4 wings, the thorax, the abdomen like we talked before, but they have a wasp waist. And that little piece right there is a special segment called the peduncle. The peduncle is how you tell a wasp from a bee, from an ant. So you look at these long, thin antennas on a wasp, and you look at the peduncle. I do think that word is funny. Now, if you look, this right here is a bee. All bees collect nectar, and bees are fuzzy because they collect nectar. They are basically the teddy bears of the insect world. The pollen collects on these hairs and gets carried from flower to flower. Bees always have a long first segment on their antennas, and sometimes they look a little bit elbowed, but they're fat and they're hairy, more like a teddy bear, whereas a wasp is going to look more like a motorcycle or a race car and be very sleek and oftentimes shiny. And bees do not have a peduncle. Now, ants, you say, I can tell ants apart from wasps because ants have no wings and wasps have wings. Well, actually, the queen ant always has wings until she gets to her home, and so does the princess. But then once they mate, they chew off their wings and start their colony, and none of the workers have wings. So if you look, what is different is an ant can have 1 or 2 peduncles. So 2 peduncles makes an ant. Kind of funny to me. I don't know if you're laughing with me, but I think that's funny. So here we go. The ant has elbowed antenna. The wasp has long, thin antenna. If it has 1 or 2 peduncles and elbows in the antenna, you know it's an ant. Wasps, ants, and bees are all Hymenoptera. And now you can tell the difference between them. Another common insect that people ask about a lot is the earwig. Earwigs. Oh, people find them in their flowers. People find them all kinds of places because earwigs do not make a permanent home until after they lay eggs. Earwigs will go and sleep in anywhere. They fly around all night. They have this hard exoskeleton wings that protects their long membrane wings that actually fold out, open up, and help them fly. And they will go and look for a place to sleep during the day. And they might look kind of scary because of these big pinchers back here. But this right here is actually their cerci that they use for mating, and also it's what they use to catch ants and aphids and other pest insects that they'll eat. To me, the most amazing thing about earwigs is that they actually nest and raise their babies. They are really good parents. Now here is a beetle. Most people know about beetles. There are more beetles on Earth than any other kind of insect. Beetles have a long, straight, hard upper wing. That is why their Latin name is Coleoptera, which means straight plus wing. The only part you need to remember is the straight line tells you it's a beetle. Beetles have chewing mouth parts. The antennas can be any length. They have a membrane wing underneath that when the hard wing lifts up, the hard leathery wing, this membranous wing unfolds just like a fan and will open up to help them fly better. And then when they land, it'll close back up and be protected by the hard wing. Now, some people cannot tell beetles from true bugs. This is a true bug, and a true bug has sucking mouth parts, not chewing like the beetle, and it also has a bigger triangle right here at the top, and the upper wing is only half leathery and half membranous. So in Latin, we call them hemiptera, which means hemi is half. And when they close their wings, it actually makes an X on their back. So now if you look at the mouth parts and you look for the X on the back, you can tell a true bug from a beetle. You guys are going to be amazing entomologists as junior rangers. So now you guys know some different types of insects and how to recognize them. Well, that is really helpful when we go out looking for insects. And I have some insects that I found here at Humboldt-Redwood State Park. Most of them were found already dead. And so I've collected them for educational purposes. Now, I wanted to show you guys some things that insects do for us some things that insects have taught us and how important insects are to humans. But first, I wanted to show you guys a praying mantis. If anybody out there is a Kung Fu Panda fan, this right here is a praying mantis. As you can see, it has the head, it has the thorax, but their thorax is actually specialized and extra elongated, so the legs actually attach and the wings attach all the way down here. And then it has the abdomen, so they actually have a whole extra section of their thorax. And they also have amazing arms to help them grab. Now, praying mantises are super important because they help us with pest control. Some of what we value insects for is pest control. Another thing that we value insects for is pollination. These right here are all insects that live here in Humboldt-Redwood State Park that are pollinators. Up here are some butterflies and moths, some flies, some beetles, some wasps, and bees. Now, I want to point out that there is a mosquito in here. You might really hate mosquitoes. I don't like mosquito bites either. But it's very important when you're understanding how ecosystems work to learn about the animals that are in the ecosystem. So let me give you a little lowdown on mosquitoes. Only female mosquitoes suck blood. The males never suck your blood. They will find you and they will buzz, and their buzzing is like a radio broadcast saying, hey, all you female mosquito women, I got a good meal over here. Come over here, come eat with me. I found somebody asleep in their tent and I'm ready to share them. Well, then the female mosquito, she comes. So when you hear the buzzing, that's the mosquito you want to kill because he's advertising. But the female mosquitoes, they come and they suck your blood. And why would they suck our blood? They suck our blood because they need a blood meal in order to be able to lay eggs. Now, mosquitoes, males and females both do pollination, but the male only ever pollinates, never sucks our blood. Just thought you might want to know that. Now, another important thing that insects do is they help decompose or recycle. They're nature's recyclers. Here are some insects that do recycling. We have a Jerusalem cricket, rhinoceros beetle, some ants, an earwig. There's some termites, houseflies, wood roach, some wood-boring beetles, including the rather large California piranhas beetle that lives here in Humboldt-Redwood State Park. We also have rose beetles. These are all insects that chew stuff and break it down. For example, these marks on this wood right here, I don't know if you can see it, but these little lines right here are actually beetles feeding on the wood right underneath the bark and eating it. And then when they're done eating it, they poop out nutrition that is used by the trees and the plants. House flies and earwigs and other insects eat soft plant material, so there aren't just piles of dead plants everywhere and piles of leaves everywhere. They really help decompose and break things down. Another type of insect that's really important, we talked about the praying mantis for pest control, but we also have the ladybug that's over here. Will eat a lot of aphids and helps out a lot in the garden. Many of these insects help, but there's a special one right here that's so small you can barely see it. This one is called an assassin bug. It's called an assassin bug because it assassinates other insects. It's always hungry, and if you look, it is so skinny, it can sneak up on anybody. Another insect that does a lot of pest control for us is the dragonfly. The dragonfly can eat hundreds of mosquitoes a day. So he's our buddy. Because after the insects pollinate, it's nice to know that they get eaten before they eat us sometimes. Now, you guys, there are many other things that insects do for us, many other things. And I want to share a few with you besides decomposing, pollinating, and pest control. Can you guys think of any? I'll give you a quick minute. Okay, so I'm going to share with you what I know. 300 years ago, in 1719, a man named Antoine Berchelt Reamer studied wasps. He studied wasps for hours and days. He was trying to learn how to make paper. This right here is paper from wasps that I put into a clear sheet of plastic so I could hold it up all at once. And it is very reddish brown because it has lots of redwood bark in it. What he did was he looked at how the wasp would chew up the bits of tree bark and plant material and make this paper. This right here is a wasp nest. And if you watch Winnie the Pooh, you might think that there would be honey in here, but this is not from bees, this is wasps, and you'll never get any honey in here. Sorry, but it would be very painful trying too, so I'll just tell you that right now. The wasps in here make this paper. And so the Kleenex and the toilet paper and the paper towel and the craft paper, construction paper, it all came from a man who was willing to sit and watch insects and learn how they made paper. You remember how I talked about insects doing pest control? Up in here, in these little combs, if you will, there is the paper, and inside is cells, and the wasp will lay an egg in each one, and then it has to go and collect a caterpillar or a spider or some other insect to put in there in order to feed its larva. So there we have pest control, but we also have wasps teaching us how to make paper. Another thing that we learned from insects, you may not believe this one, but it's true. In 1947, a man named Joe Cox was watching the larva of this insect right here. And the larva looks like this. This is 3 inches long. Now, what was fascinating to him about this larva was how fast it chewed out of the trees. It chewed very fast. And what he noticed is that it didn't go side to side like a long saw did at the time. It went from one side and then the other side, and then the other side. It didn't chew like this and build up the sawdust and get stuck. So in 1947, Joe Cox changed the chainsaw blades so that they would have one left tooth, one right tooth, and they would alternate like that. And that became the company, the Omark saw. And now all chainsaw blades are that way. So we also learned how to make better chainsaws from insects. Now, I'm going to share with you something I think is really amazing. Humans may have learned how to make pottery from insects. Here in Humboldt-Redwood State Park, on our huckleberry trees, we sometimes get these little pots. They are less than ½ an inch across. And I have found one before, but unfortunately it broke. I do not have it anymore. But these adorable little clay pots are made by a tiny little wasp. Now, there are many pieces of Native American pottery that have drawings of wasps on them. And if you watch one of these wasps work, you can see how they might have been inspired to make pots by using their hands, just like this wasp right here is using its mandibles to make this little ½ clay pot. Another thing that we were inspired about by insects is from oak galls. Now, what's an oak gall? This is an oak gall. Is that a seed from an oak tree? No, these are the acorns. These are the seeds from the oak tree. This is a lot bigger. Now, you know how if you get stung by a wasp, you swell up a lot? Well, so does the tree. the tiny little gall wasp that's actually right here, this tiny little insect, less than a quarter-inch long, stings the mighty oak tree on its branch. And the oak tree starts to swell and swell and swell. And this swelling is where the wasp lays its eggs. So what does that teach us? Well, it's actually how we learned to make permanent ink was from these galls. And some people think that the Constitution of the United States was written with ink from oak galls. Now, another thing that we get from insects, most of you are probably very familiar with, that would be beeswax. Beeswax is used in such things as lip balm or mustache wax or surfboard wax, furniture polish. There are many things, but bees also give us honey, and I really like honey. It's a wonderful sweetener in candies and baked goods, and you can even get candy honey sticks. Now, most bees do not produce honey. The bees that produce honey are honeybees, and they are domesticated. They are just like cows or chickens. They are imported from Europe and not native to the United States, and they are actually farmed. And the farmers raise them and they harvest the honey and they take care of them. And so when we talk about saving bees, we usually should talk about saving native bees. To give you an idea of what a native bee might look like, this right here is a blue orchard bee. Now there are thousands and thousands of different types of native bees, but this blue orchard bee is very important and does a lot of work pollinating in orchards. Honeybees actually have many kinds of plants they cannot pollinate. For example, the honeybee cannot pollinate a tomato plant. The tomato will hold its pollen and refuse to release it until a bee vibrates at the right frequency. So they would need to be pollinated by a bumblebee. And the bumblebee comes and goes bzzz, at just the right frequency, hums a little song, and the tomato releases its pollen. This ensures that the pollen won't be wasted because the honeybee goes to lots of different kinds of plants, but the bumblebee is more likely to go from tomato to a similar flower to another tomato, taking the pollen where it needs to be. Now, another thing that we've gotten from insects is inspiration. Insects have given us lots of inspiration for art and jewelry. It's not unusual at all to find beautiful necklaces or brooches that look like insects, and sometimes they're even made out of insect wings, or they are made out of insect colorations. The beetle wings are sometimes made into long earrings that hang down and are very shiny. Now, another thing that we've gotten from insects is inspiration. The dragonfly, we studied its sight, and we actually learned how to make visual navigation in robots 20 times more efficient by mimicking the dragonfly sight. Another thing that we get is we get a lot of forensic data. Forensic means when a crime has happened and you go in and you try and solve the mystery. So maybe you watch CSI or some show like that on TV, crime shows. We'll see insects. Remember how I talk about how they turn into the Incredible Hulk and they have to burst out of their skin and they leave that old skin behind and they grow to the next stage? By looking at the different skins of the different insects, they're actually able to solve a lot of crimes. Another thing that we get from insects is silk. Now you remember I talked about the silk moth that was here at Humboldt Redwoods State Park, and this is the Ceanothus silk moth. Now, like many insects that I've talked about today, the Ceanothus silk moth needs a specific type of plant to live on. It lives on a ceanothus plant that's also called a wild lilac. It has blue flowers. As a caterpillar, that's where it lives. As an adult, it can fly around in the redwood forest and blend in. It's a type of silk moth. And they tried to make silk out of this type of cocoon from the silk moth, but there were too many threads. However, for over 4,000 years in China, they have been making beautiful silks from long strands of cocoons from the silk moth. The Bombyx mori moth is one of the most commonly used, and silk moths are raised throughout the world, including here in the United States now. Now, another thing is we do get some medicines from insects, and mealworms and other insects are food around the world. But here in the United States, we don't usually eat insects. However, mealworms are very popular as both wild bird food and chicken food because they're an excellent source of protein and are very easy to raise. Also, they're used as pet food. If you go to the store, you may buy crickets or you may buy mealworms to feed some of your pets. Now, another really important thing that insects do is they feed wildlife. It is estimated that 2/5 of the food for all freshwater fish is insects. So insects are super important members of our food chain. They feed bats, and they're also over half of the food for 1,400 species of birds right here in North America. That's a lot of animals depending upon insects. Now, one of the craziest things that we've ever, as humans, used insects for is actually inspired by this insect. This right here is the scarab beetle, and it is standing with its head down and its hind legs up. It's basically doing a headstand. And this right here is a giant ball of dung. Dung is a nice way of saying poop. This beetle is pushing around a ball of poop. When it gets the ball perfectly round and has pushed it a long time, it will lay an egg or two in here and raise its offspring in here. Now, this is a scarab beetle. And you say, how do humans use the scarab beetles with the balls of poop? Well, in Egypt, they were gods. They worshipped them, and they believed that the scarab was who was responsible for pushing the sun across the sky every day. They did a very important role cleaning up the ground, but they did an even more important role making sure the sun went all the way across the sky every day. So insects are super, super important for us. And here in the United States, we oftentimes try to save animals and preserve animals, conserve, and help ensure that different species survive. As junior rangers, one of the things you want to do is protect the wildlife. Now, this is important because here we have a problem in the United States. I just recently read a study that says there's been a 25% decline in insect population in the world in the last 20 years. That means 1/4 of all the insects in the world are now gone, missing. 1/4 of all of our insects in the world are gone in the last 20 years. Now, why? Scientists wanted to know why. So they thought maybe it was climate change, global warming, maybe it was pest control, trying to make sure that the insects aren't eating our human food. We do that a lot in agriculture. We use a lot of pesticides to try and control the pests easily and cheaply so that we can have cheap food. But the main reason that they actually found was urbanization. That is a long word. Now, let's say it one more time. Urbanization. Urbanization means when we take the wild spaces, the wilderness, where the weeds grow, and we turn it into cities and homes for humans. Everybody needs a home. Homes are very important. We want to have homes. But when we move into new places where homes haven't been before, and we put in houses, and we put in lawns, and we bulldoze flat spaces to build those houses, we're oftentimes destroying habitat. It was actually found that the largest die-off in the entire world of insects was right in the Midwestern United States. The United States is having huge insect die-off. Now, as a junior ranger, you can help us. You can help us make sure that the insects survive. And one way you can do this is you can understand that there are insects that eat lots of different things and will probably always survive. For example, cockroaches or grasshoppers. But there are other insects that are very rare, that are very specialized, that only eat one type of plant or one part of one type of plant. And when that plant is gone, they no longer have a home and they will not survive. And they might be the only member of their species. That species might be endemic. Endemic means it only lives in that one place. So it's very important that we as humans make space for the wild places, make space for some weeds to grow, because weeds are just plants that we didn't plant, right? So here's some things that you can do when you have a vegetable garden or when you have a pretty flower garden. You can go and look around for some native plants, because even 2 or 3 bushes in your yard can be a habitat for hundreds of insects. You can also understand that if a leaf or 2 is eaten or a flower or 2 is eaten, that is part of the cycle of life, and not reach for an insecticide, or maybe not squish that insect. Maybe let the caterpillar eat a few leaves in your garden, not your whole garden, but eat a few leaves so they can turn into a butterfly and lay eggs. Now, 2 or 3 plants might not seem like a lot, but for an insect, that could be their whole world. You can also take a shallow dish of water and add a few sticks in it or some marbles, and that will be places for insects to drink. You can put it up on a pedestal or down on the ground, and it provides a cool, refreshing drink for insects on hot summer days. If you find an insect inside your house buzzing around, you might want to catch it with a cup and a piece of paper instead of killing it. And I'm not talking about houseflies. There are plenty of houseflies in this world. I'm talking about our rarer insects, our more specialized insects. It's really good to look at an insect. Take the time to look at it and see if it's different. Take the time to see if it's special. Take the time to really understand the nature and what's around us and the different ecosystems that we as humans are part of. Now, if you're interested in insects and you want to study them, when you decide to collect insects, watch them for a while. Study them for a few hours or a day, but then release them. Remember that many adult insects only live a few days, and they have a lot of work to do in those few days because they've got to mate and lay eggs in order to have babies and ensure the next generation will survive. So, you as junior rangers can really help us protect insects and make sure that we don't have a continued drop and lose even more of our insect population, because 1/4 of the species in the world is a lot to lose. Now, you guys have been a wonderful audience today, and because this is Junior Rangers, I want to share a little inspiration with you. As I said, insects often inspire art, so let's end on a good note. This right here is a Lego wasp that I want to share with you today. My son Jonathan helped me build it because he's very good with Legos. If you look, it has chewing mouth parts, good eyes, a couple of antennas that actually move. It has 4 wings, 2 on each side, and they do move as well. It has 6 legs here that can move and an abdomen with a thin wasp waist and a little stinger. So I want to say thank you to my son Jonathan for building this beautiful Legos. And if you get a chance to build a Lego insect and you'd like to share it on the Facebook comments, you're more than welcome to. Or you can also send it to us here. We'd love to see it. So you guys have been a great, great audience. I really want to thank you for joining me. And let's do the Junior Ranger Pledge together. You guys ready? You want to raise your right hand and then repeat after me. I'll put it closer so you guys can read it. Might be backwards though. Here we go. I, Shanna, now say I in your name, promise to treat the earth and all living things with care and respect, and to be thoughtful about what I do and how it affects others, and to learn about the importance of nature and our heritage. Thank you guys. Thanks for joining me today. I'll see you guys next Thursday when we'll be doing Junior Rangers again right here. Talk to you guys next week.